So we are here with Professor Jessica Goldberg, who is an assistant professor of economics at the University of Maryland and an affiliate of JPEL. She is also a non-resident fellow at the Center for Global Development, and her main research interests are development and labor economics. Okay, so first, thank you so much for being here,
Sure,
Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So first, could you tell us a little bit about what you have presented today, your papers that you have presented?
Sure. So what I talked about are two different papers that study the use of behavioral economics, defaults intended to increase people's either take-up or utilization of savings accounts, and also to affect their consumption choices. So the amount that people save in and of itself is not always a measure of welfare. We also care about how people spend their money or their ability to smooth their consumption. And so we look at different measures of the use of the accounts and also their spending.
Okay. And today there are many organizations that are starting to adopt a certain trend of unconditional or direct cash transfers. From your research, what would you think your advice or policy implications would be for those organizations?
Sure. So I guess, the first advice has to come from the research about unconditional cash transfers themselves. Mm-hmm. And the evidence about, for example, Give Directly has been pretty compelling. They're finding big positive effects. And like the paper that I presented today, they're finding that people have the capacity to manage that money. So they're not spending it on temptation goods. They're spending a lot of it on important investments that we think really do improve welfare, so things that like purchasing tin roofs, right? But then the other thing that I think comes more directly from the paper I presented today is that we see that these sorts of transfers can be ways of achieving financial inclusion. So the unconditional cash transfers in Give Directly are made via mobile money, but unconditional cash transfers in Oportunidades or Prospera are made directly into people's bank accounts. And so the result of the paper that I presented today was that when we gave people unexpected windfall transfers via cash or via direct deposit, that had a kind of a short-term effect on the composition of their savings. So people kept a little bit of money in their bank account, but actually they withdrew and had a lot of that money at home rather than in their bank account. So it didn't really change the total level of savings, and it didn't change the consumption of savings. But as it turns out, and as we study in that second paper, it did have important effects on people's understanding of the financial products available to them. So people who got large cash transfers were more likely to use their bank accounts, and they made more transactions. And this is important because when later faced with a decision about a choice over different types of financial products, people who had used their accounts more frequently made better decisions. And in our case, that constituted choosing a savings account that was better designed for their needs. It had a cost structure that was more suitable to the ways in which they were using the accounts, and therefore the accounts were less costly to them. And experience using the accounts undid what otherwise would have been an endowment effect, helped people make better decisions. And this all ties back to the unconditional cash transfers because it means that in addition to just increasing people's income and shifting people's budget set out, cash transfers can be used to facilitate financial inclusion by giving people necessary experience using the products that are available to them. So it's not just the cash that you give people, but perhaps also the way in which you give it to them and the opportunities that they have to learn about financial products available to them as a result of having some cash to spend. So we can get both the effects on consumption, the alleviation of liquidity constraints, the ability to purchase important durable items like the tin roofs, like what we see in the Give Directly intervention. But also we get this additional benefit of improved financial inclusion through improved understanding of the products available.
Right. Nowadays, with the spread and the popularity of mobile money, mainly in rural areas, also in Mozambique, where many of us work, so do you think a mobile money account could have the same role that you have been talking about as the formal bank accounts that you have been exploring?
Yeah, so mobile money is in many ways already used as a bank account. So regulation in many countries means that mobile money is not treated as a savings account. Mobile money providers are not regulated as banks. And one of the things that means is that sometimes they're limited in their ability to pay interest. But in practice, people are using mobile money accounts as savings accounts. They are accumulating balances, they're storing funds in these accounts, and they're choosing to do that because mobile money can be more accessible and less intimidating than a brick and mortar bank account. So often people live closer to a mobile money agent than they live to a brick and mortar bank account. The agent may be available at times of the day or days of the week when the bank branch itself is closed, and it may be less intimidating to make transactions with those mobile money agents. There's also functions that you don't get from the brick and mortar account, right? You don't get the ability to send remittances as flexibly with the brick and mortar account. Somebody has to have another account to receive a remittance sent that way. So I think there is a huge potential for mobile money to both increase financial inclusion and also to enable other sorts of public benefits programs, government programs, but other transfer programs as well, to work in ways that they couldn't without mobile money. So Give Directly relies on mobile money. The alternative would have been to hand out cash. A program that I study in Malawi, which is the government-run MASAF, Malawi Social Action Fund Public Works Program, currently pays all of its beneficiaries through pay parades. And a pay parade involves a district official going out in a district vehicle driven by a driver and accompanied by police officers with a lot of cash, and they hand it out. And a pay parade is literally a line of people waiting to be paid in cash. And that's time-consuming, it's expensive, it's risky because there's a lot of transport of cash. And what that means is that the program has to pay infrequently and on very fixed schedules. But if mobile money were available, then the program could have much lower transaction costs for making the payment, because instead of paying all of these staff and providing the fuel in the vehicle, you just send money via mobile money. And it could pay more frequently. So if people are working for a public works program because they have experienced a negative shock and they need to smooth consumption, they could get paid quickly rather than having to wait to get their money. They could get paid more frequently. And they don't actually have to hold all of the money in cash. So I think there's a huge amount of potential. We do have to be careful that there are some disadvantages or some potential costs. So for example, mobile money transactions are expensive, and the nonlinear pricing scheme for mobile money can mean that the poorest customers wind up paying the most, right? Because they make lots of small transactions and they incur therefore lots of the fixed costs. Or they're incentivized to actually take out more money than they would optimally want to take out. They would prefer to leave money on their balance or to send a different amount of money, but the pricing changes, and so they come right up to the cut point and respond to the pricing structure. Because mobile money isn't regulated as a bank, it's unclear what happens if a mobile money provider goes out of business. Where does all of that money go? Right? So that lack of regulation is a risk in some sense. And then I think, one of the biggest impediments is something that will be solved over time, but has to do with the liquidity of the agent network. So right now, a big constraint to the use of mobile money is that essentially it shifts the responsibility for managing cash distribution from banks to a network of low-income, mostly women, who are entrepreneurs operating as mobile money agents. But in order to do a transaction, then if you want to cash in, then the agent has to have enough e-credit to sell you, and now she is stuck holding all of this cash, and she has to find a way to either safely store that or transact it with another customer. So when the mobile money system really takes off, as it has in Kenya, or as it's starting to in Uganda or Tanzania, then there's just this flow of cash and e-credit. So there's the liquidity in the system, and the burden on the agents isn't as great. There's also more agents to help share the burden, and often they have greater access to actually brick and mortar accounts where they can deposit excess cash if they need to. But in places where that hasn't happened, it can be tough to start to make large transactions via mobile money because the local agents don't have either the e-credit or the cash available. So the public works program, if you immediately started paying everybody in mobile money and everybody went to their local agent to try to get money on the same day, she wouldn't have enough cash, and it wouldn't really be reasonable to expect her to be able to do all by herself what the government took, you know, an accountant and a driver and a couple of police officers to accomplish. So we've really got to figure out how to solve that liquidity problem, and over time I think it will be solved. And over time, you know, one possibility is that the solution is that there's less cashing in and cashing out and more use of mobile money for transactions, not just for storing and sending money, but for actually making purchases. But in this intermediate phase, the liquidity challenge is real. So I think there's enormous potential both to achieve financial inclusion and to improve the design and operation of other programs, but there are still some big challenges.
Okay. Thank you so much for having us, Professor.
Sure, nice to talk to you.
Thank you.